Welcome to Faith and Science. I'm Dr. John Ashton. Here in Australia, in the recent census results being released, it was interesting that fewer people were identifying as Christians. A lot more people were identifying as no religion. Although there was other research that came out from another survey that suggested that people still had faith. I think one of the things that has been, responsible for the decline in people perhaps believing in the Bible has been a lot of the talk about, the Big Bang Theory and, of course, evolution. I've spoken many times, of course, about we now know that the biochemistry and the structure of living systems are so complex that random blind mutations, chemical mutations to DNA, could not produce all the new body parts. So that's a given. Evolution actually is absolutely impossible. But just recently there's been quite a bit of talk about some different astronomy findings as well. One that I noticed when I turned on my home computer the other day, there was a news feed popped up about Aussie scientists and working on making discoveries in the area of dark matter. Now, dark matter is one of the essential ingredients for the Big Bang Theory to work. And we were all told about the Big Bang Theory that, explaining the origin of the universe and so forth. But it relies on the existence of a very large amount of dark matter. And that is mass or matter that can produce gravitational effects and so forth, that hasn't been detected yet. And one of the things, of course, is that the dark matter they claim is hard to locate because it doesn't absorb, reflect or emit light. So it's hard to see. So that's why they call it dark matter, obviously. So one of the headlines was, and there were different headlines reported, I noticed, in different local newspapers and websites, that Australian researchers have taken a step closer to solving one of the biggest mysteries of the universe. And I think this particular news feed went on to say, while science may still be in the dark about what dark matter is, it now has a better idea of what it is thanks to the University of Western Australia organ experiment, ORGAN experiment. And so they obtained some results and they've been doing a lot of research to search for this hypothetical dark matter particle known as axions. And essentially it was the results of a PhD student who'd been working in this area, essentially using their latest technology that they'd developed, a haloscope detector. They didn't detect any axions. So, of course, dark matter is believed, according to the Big Bang Theory, to account for 85% of all matter in the universe, and it's supposed to have major effects on its, the universe's structure and how it formed. And but so far, all the experiments to try and detect it, to find it, to understand it, have failed. And so it was interesting, though, that the result was reported in the media as a very positive thing. We've made this major breakthrough with regard to discovering what dark matter is. Well, what had they found? They'd found that they couldn't detect any hypothetical particles of dark matter with their experiments to date. But the claim is, well, that eliminates this particular hypothesis, so we need to explore other hypotheses now to try and explain it. So when you look at, I've spoken before about, so many problems with the Big Bang Theory, inflation theory. I referred in some talks earlier, one on, I think, the article in Scientific American on Pop Goes the Universe, how The evidence for inflation theory is just not there as well. And again, that underpins the Big Bang theory as well. So, so much of the experiments that were done, science is still drastically working in this area. Why? Because they need to have a mechanical explanation for the origin of the universe. Otherwise, the explanation is God. And the evidence for God in the structure and so forth and the laws of physics and chemistry is overwhelming. But they want to keep ignoring this. And, to me, this should be flashing red lights to people that there's a major, major movement to, discredit the Christian faith. It's occurring in many, many areas, from morals through to, whether it's biblical, archaeology or whatever. There's just a major movement. And the fact that this movement is there should make people really prick up their ears. Why is there's so much denial? The creation around us of the amazing composition and biochemistry and living things points to an amazing supernatural creator and supernatural creation, because the laws of chemistry can't make living organisms from scratch. The chemical reactions don't go in nature that are required to make these organisms. They will only occur with existing catalysts like enzymes and this sort of thing in protected environments. So we have this overwhelming evidence, and still there's this push to blind people to this overwhelming evidence for the existence of God. And it really frustrates me that we have generations now of young people or of people that have grown up believing these false theories. Another one that was just on the 15th of July 2022, Monday the 11th of July 2022, NASA released the first of the James Webb Space Telescope's full-colour images. They're known as the Webb's Deep Field. And there was a lot of news about this because this data revealed a lot of information and images, visual images, with unprecedented clarity of very distant objects. For example, the Webb's telescope showed the galaxy cluster SMACS 0723, that's SMACS 0723, and they claimed as it appeared 4.6 billion years ago. So once you hear these sort of claims being made in press releases, people automatically say, okay, well, look, this star cluster is 4.6 billion years old. And then, of course, there are a whole lot of news feeds that referred to, the distant universe, and they might be able to see parts of that are, and 13 billion years old as the age. And people say, well, hang on, doesn't the Bible talk about Earth being created only 6,000 years ago? Obviously it's not right. But they don't understand what is involved with space-time. They don't understand that the calculations that are used to calculate these figures assume that the universe has expanded in a uniform way ever since the photons left that particular galaxy, and that is the particles of light. Photons are particles of light. And that for the duration of the photon's journey, the space between the telescope and that particular SMACS 0723 galaxy was homogeneous in terms of mass and the anisotropic speed of light. In other words, light in a particular direction. You see, because light is dependent on time, because the speed factor, and time, we keep forgetting, time is dependent on mass. Time is dependent on gravity. It's fascinating that the general theory of relativity points out that time does not exist without matter. Now, this is something that, the average person doesn't sort of realise or think. Matter of fact, most science students don't, think in these terms, that time requires matter. It's a fascinating outcome of the general theory of relativity, which we assume is correct. because so many things are matched by this. And as I'm pointing out, more and more, when we get into deep physics, it more and more supports the biblical creation. One of the things that can be claimed, though, about the SMACS 0723 galaxy is that it has a redshift value of about 0.39. And according to the Hubble redshift distance relation, this means that the galaxy is very, very far away. Remember, when we say 4.6 billion light years, that's a measure of distance, not necessarily of time that's passed. It's interesting that these galaxies actually distort space and time so that the light from behind this particular galaxy cluster appears to travel on a curved path. So in actual fact, it has a lensing effect, which the scientists are taking advantage of to understand what is happening even further out. Now, it's interesting that the Big Bang model says that the first galaxies created are the most distant ones, right? And so they are predicted to be in blue in colour, as they're said to contain a high proportion of young, hot, short-lived, high-mass stars. And also the distant galaxies are also predicted to have a lower level of metals and less formed structures. However, a number of the current observations don't follow these predictions. And it's interesting, one leading expert on distant galaxies, that's Professor Carl Gazelbruch, he's at the Swinburne University of Technology in Melbourne. When he commented on the results of the Webb Deep Field, he said, we're seeing a wide range of colours that we haven't seen before in the early universe. It's not just a case of the early universe being young, blue and lumpy. It's more complicated than that. So here again we see that this telescope is bringing forward results that aren't fitting the Big Bang model. So this is just further evidence again. So it looks like these images will give the current Big Bang model more problems than it already has. If you want to read about this, there's actually, if you go to creation.com on the internet, Google creation.com, they've got some comments about these new results from the James Webb Space Telescope, which is actually a telescope on a spacecraft about 1 million miles from Earth, and so that's why it can look further out into the atmosphere. And so the author, Scott Devlin, comments on this there on that website there. So we know that the Bible tells us that God created the universe, just straight out, and also the earth is the centre of God's attention, and so it's likely to be somewhere near the centre of the universe. Now, a lot of people get concerned about the this time factor. And as I mentioned earlier, it's interesting that according to general relativity, time does not exist without matter. And the other thing is that matter greatly distorts the whole concept of time. So very high gravity, in the presence of high gravity, time slows right down. The measurement of clocks slows right down. The adverse effect of that is that the faster we go, in terms of speed, that time also slows down. So we have some very, very interesting aspects here in terms of understanding space. And it's interesting that the Bible talks about how when God created the firmament, which is space, on the second day, he separated the waters from under the firmament from above the firmament, separated the waters, and the firmament was in between. And the waters underneath, they became earth. Now, it doesn't say much about what happened to the waters above the firmament, but we know that the stars on the fourth day and the sun and everything were created in the firmament. So that suggests that there's a water layer outside or on the edge of the universe. And, we can't know for sure, but we can have a theory, and it's interesting. Dr. Russell Humphreys, a creationist physicist, has proposed that if there is this massive amount of water that God made on day 2 when he separated and moved it out, that this would have a massive effect on space-time. And if the universe has a definite size, maybe expanding still, because God talks about how God, in the Psalms it talks about how God stretched out the heavens and so forth, then a massive amount, if there's a massive amount of water on the edge of the universe there, that this can have a distortion of space-time effects and could affect our understanding of time during these days of the creation week. Another physicist, creationist physicist, Dr. John Harnett, has uses an aspect of Einstein's relativity theory and has also developed a cosmology. And he's applied a concept that was developed by the Israeli cosmologist Dr. Moshe Carmeli. He's dead now, he died in 2007, but it's called cosmological relativity. And Carmeli argued that to adequately describe the large-scale structure of the universe, in addition to length, breadth, depth and time, or the 4 dimensions, another measure or dimension was needed, which was the velocity of the expansion of space. And so this dimension has an effect on gravity and time. And so hence the theory was called cosmological general relativity. You can Google that and look it up if you're interested. Now, Carmeli's ideas have been successful in explaining long-standing astronomical puzzles such as the high redshift of supernovas and galactic rotation observations, the spheroidal galaxy anomalous dispersion, and also the expansion of the large-scale universe. The other thing is that it doesn't need dark matter or dark energy. But the interesting thing is that Dr. Harnett realised that much of his theory worked with a universe with a centre and an edge, because Carmelian relativity was originally proposed on the basis of the cosmological principle, where you have a universe as more or less like a surface of a lesser dimensional object, and therefore it has no centre or edge. And so that's the assumption of the cosmological principle, which was also part of the Big Bang theory. And the reason for that is that it gives homogeneity to space. If you have a centre and an edge, then that means that space may not necessarily be homogeneous. So this is, quite an interesting aspect that much of that cosmology, Carmeli's cosmology, will work even if you do have a centre and an edge. Secondly, if you have a centre and an edge, the acceleration of the expansion of space, such as could be expected on the 4th day of the creation week, would have a profound implications for time during that period. Time dilation results, but not due to a net gravitational effect. It's due to the enormous accelerated stretching. It's interesting that a number of articles were published on this. Dr. Humphreys published an article in the Journal of Creation, volume 22, pages 84 to 92 of issue 3 back in 2008. And you can also read up about it if, again, you Google creation.com and do a search on dilation. Also, there's quite strong evidence for this in the Pioneer anomaly. And it's quite fascinating how the Pioneer anomaly really supports the biblical description of the universe. Now, the Pioneer anomaly was some measurements that were done on a number and found to be observed on a number of spacecraft. It was a small but a strange deceleration of spacecraft that was observed. So it was observed for the Galileo spacecraft, the Ulysses, and Pioneers 10 and 11. And there's really been no explanation for why those spacecraft slowed down. But the Dr. Humphreys, that creationist physicist, was able to explain the Pioneer anomaly as being due to a change in the fabric of space. In fact, this anomaly could be the first local manifestation we have observed of the expansion of the cosmos. The thing was that Humphreys, in explaining the Pioneer anomaly, as it's been known, used assumptions that violently contradict the foundation assumptions of the Big Bang, which says that the universe has no centre and no edge, because in that model the fabric of space would not change. Whereas with the model where you have a centre and an edge, the fabric of space will change. And so that's why even to this date, and there was a paper published in Physical Letters, I think around about 2012, Physical Review Letters by Slava Terishve, where they were attempting to explain the slowdown as part of heat radiated in the forward direction by the spacecraft. But even then, it only could explain about a third of the anomalous acceleration. And also, how come all these other different satellites that were out there, or spacecraft that were out there, how come they all slowed by exactly the same amount, although they would have had different designs and structures and therefore radiated different amounts of heat? And the other fascinating thing was that Dr. Humphreys, looked at the radar data that was published for the spacecraft showing the anomalous deceleration, and it showed the anomalous deceleration levelling out and not steadily declining, which they would have expected according to the Big Bang model. The value that it levels out at is almost exactly the presently observed accepted value for the Hubble constant times the speed of light. As a matter of fact, the results were even closer than in the earlier reports of deceleration. And so to have heat accidentally give a number with such cosmic significance, Dr. Humphreys' comment seems highly unlikely. And of course, Pioneers 10 and 11 were not the only spacecraft to show the anomaly. As I mentioned, Galileo and Ulysses also showed the same deceleration. It wasn't quite as clear because they weren't as far away from the sun. So it's quite fascinating there. There was an attempt, of course, to publish data. Tereshov and the co-authors of the article in Physical Review Letters wrote to Humphreys and said that they were planning to publish more data that would support their claim. But I did a Google search just the other day, and of course this original paper was published in 2012, and nothing was published after that paper that I could find anyway, using Google Scholar. So it's quite interesting that all this work is being done to try and support things like the Big Bang Theory, and it's all failing. We can't find dark matter. As I pointed out earlier, inflation theory doesn't have support, and yet we're finding little snippets of information that are supporting the creationist model of there being the universe having a centre and having an edge. And we also see that these models, the creationist model, also explains and gives us some clues to the time problem. We don't really know what happened during that creation week, but we know that our understanding of space-time, the fabric of space, we're still just beginning to understand that. We know as we look at these different stars, they don't fit the model of the Big Bang anyway. And so the amazing concept of time being dependent on matter, again, puts us right into the sphere of God's creation of the universe in 6 days. You've been listening to Faith and Science. And remember, if you want to re-listen to these programs, just Google 3abnaustralia.org.au, all one word, and click on the listen button. And remember, there are a number of topics that I've covered in the past. That there's probably over 100 of topics there, and as you scroll down, keep scrolling down. When you click on the radio on the listen button, keep scrolling down on Faith and Science. There's a range of topics there. And so please share these on your social media pages and make people aware that there's overwhelming evidence for the Creator God of the Bible. I'm Dr. John Ashton. Have a great day.
You've been listening to a production of 3ABN Australia Radio.